I've been a vessel scribe for 19 standard cycles. That means I document things. I sit in observation decks, I carry a calibration pad, and I write down what happens. Ship docking violations, tariff disputes, contraband scans, arguments over berthing fees. Boring things, safe things. I have never once, in 19 cycles, written a report that made the review council physically request I attend a medical evaluation afterward. This one did. So let me start from the beginning. Let me start from the exact moment I walked onto docking ring 7 at Level 9 and saw a human male crouching in the middle of the floor, speaking softly to a Vorkai. I'll explain why that matters in a moment. First, let me tell you what a Vorkai is. Part 1, what you need to understand before I tell you what I saw. There is a reason the Galactic Transit Authority posts warning panels at every major hub in 7 languages. There is a reason those panels are not small. They are tall, they are bright. They are made from the same reflective composite they use for emergency evacuation corridors, the kind that glows even through smoke, even through debris fields, even when every light source on a station has failed. And every single one of those panels says the same thing, in the same thick lettering at the top. VORKAI Proximity Protocol, Mandatory Observance. Below that, in descending order of importance. Do not approach within 40 standard meters. Do not establish direct visual contact for more than 3 seconds. Do not raise your voice or make sudden movements. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt physical contact. If a Vorkai makes an advance toward you, move slowly in the opposite direction and alert station security immediately. If a Vorkai makes physical contact with you, do not resist. Signal distress, await assistance. That last one is the one that tells you everything you need to know. Because when they wrote "do not resist," they weren't being polite. They weren't trying to keep things diplomatic. They were being practical. They were acknowledging the biological reality that resistance in that scenario is not a meaningful category of option. It doesn't exist. You don't resist a Vorkai any more than you resist a gravitational anomaly. You survive it if you're lucky, you don't resist it. A Vorkai stands on average 3.5 meters at the shoulder. That's the shoulder, not the head. The head extends another 1.5 meters above that, carried on a neck that moves with this fluid-independent quality, like it's on a separate axis from the rest of the body. The skull is elongated, slightly flattened on top, and set with 4 eyes arranged in a slight arc. 2 forward-facing, 2 lateral, full panoramic awareness without needing to turn. Their hide is not like skin. It's not like fur. It's not like scales exactly, though it has a quality of scales in the way it catches light. Tessellated, layered, each segment overlapping the next in a way that somehow manages to be flexible and armored at the same time. The color shifts. Not dramatically, it's not a display like some species. It's subtle. Under calm conditions, a Vorkai reads as deep charcoal, almost black, with these thin striations of dark blue-green that only become visible when the light hits them right. Under stress, the striations brighten. Under threat display, they go almost luminescent, this pale, cold, blue-white that station crews call the last thing you see. I've seen photographs of that display, documentation purposes. I had never seen it in person. I had also never seen anyone survive being within 10 meters of a Vorkai outside of a controlled environment, without showing stress indicators. Every species has different tells. Threni go rigid, salivia go pale at the gill fronds. My own kind experience a crystallization reflex in our secondary eyes. But universally, every species, without exception. You feel it when a Vorkai is near you. There's this pressure. Not physical pressure, not exactly, or maybe it's subphysical, something that happens at the level of whatever deep, primitive circuitry handles threat assessment before your conscious mind gets the report. It hits you before you've processed what you're seeing. Your body knows first. The Vorkai on docking ring 7 that morning was a large one. Larger than average. Its head, when held level, cleared the top of the transit archway with barely a half meter to spare. The archways on Level 9 are built to 4.8 standard meters. I did the math later. I needed something to do with my hands after I stopped shaking. It had come in on a neutral transport. One of the independent caravan vessels that occasionally carries Vorkai between systems for reasons the Vorkai have never fully explained to anyone, and which no one has pressed them to explain. for reasons that should be obvious. The transit authority had been notified. Standard protocol, they'd cleared the ring. Or they thought they had. Part 2, what I was doing there. I want to be clear about this. I was not supposed to be there. I was supposed to be in Sub-Office 14 on the administrative tier, completing cycle end documentation for a series of minor import violations involving a Druvani merchant and some mislabeled spice containers. Genuinely tedious work. The kind that makes you resent the job you chose, briefly, before remembering that the alternative was following your secondary cycle instructor into agricultural cartography, which is even more boring. I was there because I'd taken a shortcut. Docking Ring 7 is technically off the main transit corridor when you come from Sub-Office 14. You have to go around the cooling infrastructure housings, through the secondary transit junction, past the berthing authority kiosks. It adds about 4 minutes. But if you cut through the ring itself during a low-traffic window, you save those 4 minutes, and also you get a view of the docking bay, which, aesthetically, is one of the better views on the station. The outer viewport panels are triple-thickness composite, and on a clear transit cycle, you can see 3 of Muravel's moons simultaneously. I've been taking this shortcut for 8 cycles. The transit authority had cleared the ring. They had not told the administrative tier. So when I came through the secondary junction door, carrying my calibration pad, thinking about spice containers, and stepped onto the main floor of Docking Ring 7. I walked into the pressure before I understood what I was walking into. It hit me across the chest like something physical. Like a wave except not warm, like stepping into a cold current in deep water except I wasn't in water. My secondary eyes crystallized. I stopped moving. I did not decide to stop moving. My body just stopped. And then my primary eyes caught up with what my hindbrain had already processed, and I saw the Voakai. It was in the middle of the ring floor. Far end, maybe 35 meters from where I was standing. The ring is long enough that 35 meters still puts you inside the 40-meter exclusion zone, technically, but not dangerously so. Not if you stay still. It was facing away from me, mostly. One of those lateral eyes had me in peripheral, but the body was oriented toward the far transit corridor. Tail low, not a threat posture, just present. I did not breathe for a moment. And then I noticed the human. Part 3, the human. I want to describe this carefully because I've told this story verbally maybe 40 times now, and every time I get to this part, whoever I'm telling it to assumes I've exaggerated something. That I'm adding color. That I've let the retelling inflate the details. I haven't, I'm a vessel scribe. I wrote it down within the cycle. Here is what I wrote. Human male, mid-cycle biological age, approximate, somewhere in the 3rd or 4th decade by their reckoning. Average height for the species. Brown hair, somewhat long, partially contained behind the cranium. Work clothing, the kind rated for moderate atmosphere variance, practical, not dress grade. No visible equipment beyond a standard transit pass clipped to an outer pocket, and what appeared to be a small personal device holstered at the hip. Posture crouching. Location, approximately 8 meters from the Voakai. Expression relaxed. I read that back to myself 3 times after I wrote it. 8 meters. The exclusion protocol specifies 40 meters, not because 40 meters is where they start to notice you. Not because 40 meters is where it gets uncomfortable. 40 meters is the safety threshold, the distance at which a Voakai cannot reach you in less than the time it takes for standard station security to respond to a distress signal. 8 meters is not 40 meters. 8 meters is well inside the range where if the Voakai moved toward you, station security responding immediately would still not reach you in time. The math has been done. It's in the protocol documentation. I've read it. I've translated portions of it for 3 different vessel scribe training cohorts. 8 meters is the kind of distance you're at when you're already in it. And the human was crouching. Not standing, not in a defensive posture, not braced. Crouching, weight forward, one knee nearly touching the deck plating the way you'd crouch to look at something on the ground. Something small, something that needed to be at eye level. Except the Voakai was not small. Nothing about the Voakai was small. And the human was making a sound. I couldn't hear it clearly from where I was standing. My auditory range is narrower than most species, and the ambient hum of the ring's cooling systems was working against me. But I could see the human's mouth moving, and the quality of the movement was slow, steady, rhythmic. Not words exactly, or not just words, more like a cadence, like the human was speaking in a rhythm they'd chosen on purpose. Low, unhurried. I stood there. I didn't move toward them. I wasn't physically capable of moving toward them, I think. My legs had made a decision independently of my brain, and the decision was, we are staying here. But I also didn't leave, because I was watching a thing that I could not fully process, and some part of me needed to know how it ended. Part 4, the hand. The Voakai had not moved. That was the thing I kept coming back to, even as I watched. The Voakai had not moved. Not toward the human, not away. It was still in the same orientation it had been when I first stepped onto the ring floor. Lateral eye still tracking me peripherally with the absolute dispassion of something that has clocked you as present and irrelevant simultaneously. Primary gaze still aimed ahead, slightly downward now at the crouching human. Its tail low, as I said, not still. Voakai tails are always in motion, small adjustments, subtle shifts, the way a gyroscope finds its balance. But the motion I was seeing now was slower than baseline. Slower and more, I want to say deliberate, but deliberate implies a choice, and I'm not sure the tail is where Voakai keep their choices. It was slower in the way breathing gets slower when something is calm. The human's voice kept up its rhythm. Whatever they were saying it consistently, without pause. And I wrote this down within the cycle, and I have not changed a single word of it since. The human extended their hand. Slowly, no sudden movement. The hand came out from the body at an angle, not raised, not palm out in a gesture of anything, just out. Horizontal, at the level of the knee that was closest to the deck. Extended toward the Voakai. I almost made a sound. I don't know what sound. Some sound my body wanted to make that my throat suppressed. Because you have to understand what the human was doing. The hand extension is, in most galactic behavioral frameworks, a proximity invitation. It's used for exactly this, meeting an unknown animal that hasn't been fully socialized toward you. You extend. You make yourself small. You let the animal come to you. You make your posture non-threatening. You make your voice even. You don't move toward. You let the approach be on their terms. It's used for animals. It's used for creatures that respond to behavioral cues, to body language, to proximity dynamics. The Voakai are not typically categorized in that way. The Voakai are classified as Class 7 sentient, one step below full diplomatic recognition, which they don't want and have communicated they don't want through the only communication method most of the galaxy has experienced from them, which is proximity displacement. You approach them asking for a diplomatic relationship. They walk toward you until you leave. That's the conversation. They are not creatures you extend a hand toward. And the Voakai lowered its head. The neck extended. That independent, fluid movement I mentioned, it extended, bringing the massive skull downward and forward toward the human, toward the extended hand, in a motion so slow that for a long moment I couldn't process it as motion at all. It moved toward the hand. I was keeping count at some point during this without realizing I was doing it, counting seconds, the way you do when you can't do anything else. I had counted to maybe 11, maybe 12, since the hand went out, and the head had covered maybe half the distance between where it started and where the hand was. Slow, patient, coming down like something that didn't need to hurry. And I realized, somewhere around second 11 or 12, that my calibration pad was in my hand and I was recording. I hadn't consciously raised it. I hadn't consciously made the decision to document. But I had it up. Angle adjusted, visual capture active, because I am a vessel scribe, and apparently some part of me was going to do the job even while the rest of me was running on pure suspended horror. The Voakai's head came to rest maybe 30 centimeters from the human's extended hand. It stopped there. The human did not flinch. The human did not pull back. The human did not do any of the things that every survival instinct every species has ever developed should have been screaming at them to do. The human kept talking, low and steady, and after about 4 seconds of that, the head right there, the breath of the thing visible in the slight atmospheric temperature differential it created, close enough that I could see it from 35 meters away. After 4 seconds, the human moved their hand forward. The last 30 centimeters, and touched the Voakai. Part 5 contact. I need to stop here and acknowledge something. There is a record of every species that has made unsolicited physical contact with a Volkai. The record is not long. It exists primarily in injury reports, incident documentation, and in one case a memorial citation. The Volkai do not typically initiate contact themselves, they don't need to. The reputation serves. The size serves. The way they look at you serves. When contact happens, it's almost always accidental. A crowded transit corridor, a narrow access passage. Someone doesn't see the Volkai coming until too late to course correct. Someone is moving fast and rounds a corner. In documented accidental contact cases, the average outcome is classified as disturbance response. The Volkai reacts to the contact stimulus with a rapid movement. The contacted individual is displaced, politely put, and there is damage either to the individual or to the infrastructure nearby, or both. There is no documented case I was aware of, before this morning, of intentional physical contact resulting in anything other than that. There is also no documented case of intentional contact. Because no one does it. No one. The human placed their hand flat against the underside of the Volkai's jaw. The underside of the jaw, which required the hand to come up slightly from where it had been, palm turning, fingers spreading, settling against the tessellated plating in a motion that was so absolutely ordinary, so exactly like every gesture of contact with any creature I'd ever seen, that it took me a long moment to reconcile it with where it was happening. The Volkai's eyes, the forward-facing pair, which I could see from my angle now that the head was lowered, the eyes did not change. No dilation, no narrowing. They remained at exactly the quality they had been at when the head started moving. The tail stopped. That's what I noticed first. The constant small motion of the tail, the gyroscope adjustment I'd been watching, it stopped. Not an attention stop, not in the way you freeze before a movement. It stopped the way things stop when they're settled, when they've arrived somewhere. And then the Volkai made a sound. I can't describe it accurately in standard notation. It doesn't fit the frequency ranges I normally work with. It was low, lower than low. The kind of sound you feel before you hear it, if you hear it at all. A resonance more than a noise. The docking ring's floor panels picked it up, and I felt it through the soles of my feet, 35 meters away, a vibration that had nothing to do with the cooling systems. The human kept their hand in place, kept talking, and began, I am writing this exactly as I observed it, I am not embellishing, I am a vessel scribe, began slowly moving their hand. Not pulling away, not repositioning for safety, moving the way you move your hand against the jaw of a creature who has leaned into your touch, back and forth, slow, steady. Petting it. The human was petting the Volkai. Part 6, the security team arrives. I found out later that the transit authority had picked up an alert from my calibration pads, passive environmental monitoring. Calibration pads log atmospheric data continuously, temperature variance, pressure, particulate, and several other indices. One of those indices is a proximity signature. When you're within certain ranges of certain classified entities, the pad logs it and routes a low-priority notification to the nearest authority relay. My pad had been logging from the moment I stepped onto the ring floor. The notification it sent was flagged low priority because it registered one individual within proximity range of a Volkai rather than the multiple individual threshold that triggers the urgent response. But someone on the authority relay saw it anyway, and they did the reasonable thing, which was to send a security team. The security team was 4 individuals. I know this because I watched them come through the far transit corridor door, the one near the Volkai's original position, which they hadn't realized the Volkai had moved away from, and I watched them stop. All 4 of them, at exactly the same moment, in the way you stop when your body sends the pressure signal. They were about 20 meters out from me, which put them roughly 55 meters from the Volkai and the human, well outside the exclusion zone, technically safe. They had their equipment with them, the non-contact dispersal units that station security uses, which work by generating a frequency stimulus that's unpleasant to most species, like a very loud sound you can't hear. The idea being that in an incident situation, you can encourage movement without direct engagement. They did not raise their equipment. One of them, the one in front, who I found out later was a shift coordinator named Velis Oran, Threni species, had been doing security work on Muravel 9 for 11 cycles. One of them was holding a communication device and appeared to be speaking into it very quietly. I found out later what they were saying. They were being asked by the transit authority relay what they were observing and whether they needed additional units. Velis Iran's response, which was recorded because all authority communications are recorded, was, "I don't hold on, I don't think we should approach. I don't know what it's petting it. The human is petting it. No, I'm not having a medical episode. I'm telling you what I'm seeing." The relay asked what they should do. Velis Iran said, "Nothing. I think we do nothing. I think we just watch." And that's what we did. All 6 of us, me and the 4 security team members, spread across the ring floor at various distances. All of us outside the exclusion zone. All of us watching a human from a species that has been registered in the galactic transit system for less than 200 standard cycles sit on a docking ring floor and scratch the jaw of a creature that every other species in the known galaxy has spent generations carefully, specifically, deliberately staying away from. Part 7. What happened when the VORRKAI lay down? I want to be accurate about the timeline here, because later there were several accounts from people who weren't present that got details wrong, and I want the record to be clear. The human made contact at approximately 09:14 station time. The Volkai lowered its head to the ring floor at 09:23. 9 minutes. For 9 minutes, the human maintained contact, hand against the jaw. Then at some point the hand moved higher, to the region between the first set of lateral sensory structures near the skull. And the Volkai made that low resonance sound 4 more times during those 9 minutes, each time a little longer than the last. And then the Volkai folded. That's the only word I have for it. Its legs, which are set wide, structured for power rather than speed, 4 of them in a diagonal arrangement, its legs folded underneath it. Not all at once. Sequentially, front to back, the way a large creature chooses to lie down rather than falls. Controlled. Deliberate. The Volkai lowered itself to the ring floor. All 3.5 meters of it, plus the neck, plus the head, which rested with a weight I could feel from 35 meters away as a low vibration through the deck. And lay there. The human, who had had to stand up slightly and adjust position as the head came down, the human moved with it, stayed in contact. By the time the Volkai was fully on the floor, the human was crouching beside the skull, one hand still in contact with the jaw region, one hand now resting on the top of the skull itself. Both hands, petting a Volkai's head with both hands. I have the recording. And I've reviewed it a significant number of times since that morning, and I still, every time I watch it, experience a period of roughly 30 seconds where I am unable to do anything else. Part 8, The Galactic Soldiers. At 09:31, the corridor door at the opposite end of the ring from where I was standing opened, and a patrol unit came through. Not transit authority, not station security. Galactic Trade Coalition enforcement. I recognized the designation markers on their equipment. 3 individuals, armed with the standard-issue contact deterrent units that Coalition enforcement carries, which are several grades above what station security uses. They had come through the main docking access rather than the ring-level door, which meant they hadn't been watching what I'd been watching. They had been routed there by the alert system based on a Volkai proximity flag that had escalated at some point in the relay chain. They came through the door in standard patrol formation, spread formation, the way you do in a potentially active situation. Front individual leading, side 2 flanking, weapons not raised but not holstered either. Prepared posture. They saw the Volkai. The formation broke. Not in a panic. Coalition enforcement training is extensive, I'll give them that. It didn't break into chaos, but the spacing changed. The front individual stepped back. The flanking 2 moved apart from each other, creating more distance. The kind of involuntary movement that happens when something triggers the pressure response, and your body adjusts before you've decided it should. Then they saw the human. The front individual, whose designation I later learned was Senior Enforcer Dravit Kell, raised their communication unit. I could not hear what was said. I have access to the communication records from that period, and I'll include the relevant excerpt here because I think it captures something important. Kell, Control, we have a situation on docking ring 7. Voakai on the floor, recumbent posture. One civilian in contact. Control in contact. Kel, physical contact. Direct, the civilian is there touching it, both hands. Control, Enforcer Kel, please repeat. Kel, I have repeated it. The civilian is touching the Voakai. The Voakai is lying down and the civilian is touching it, and the Voakai it's making a sound. Something low. I can feel it through the floor. Control, what is the status of the civilian? Kel, the civilian looks fine. The civilian looks calm. Control, I need guidance. What's the protocol for? Is there a protocol for this? I can't find a protocol for this. Control, stand by. There is a 23-second pause in the communication record. Control, Enforcer Kel, we're looking. Kel, I figured. Another pause. Control, there is no protocol. Kel, I know. Part 9, what KELL did. Senior Enforcer Dravet Kel made a decision that I think deserves to be documented, because it was the right decision, and it was not the obvious one. They could have approached. That's what the situation would conventionally call for, a coalition enforcement team encountering a potential incident with a Class 7 sentient entity and an unprotected civilian. The standard action is to approach, assess the civilian's condition, and prepare for extraction if necessary. They did not approach. They stayed at the doorway end of the ring, which put them roughly 60 meters from the Voakai and the human, well outside the exclusion zone, and they watched. Later at the review, Kel said, I made a tactical assessment. The Voakai was in a recumbent posture. The civilian was in contact and did not appear to be in distress. The Voakai appeared not agitated. Moving toward that situation, breaking whatever was happening there, seemed like a higher-risk action than holding position. The review committee asked how Kel had made that assessment. Kel said, I looked at it. The Voakai looked, I don't have a better word for it, it looked comfortable. And the human looked like they'd done this before. That last part, I've thought about that a lot. Like they'd done this before. Because the thing is, and I noticed this too from my end of the ring, the human was not performing. There was no quality of amazement in what they were doing. No carefulness that spoke of unfamiliarity, no hesitation that suggested they were working through something novel. They were doing it the way you do something you know how to do. The hand placement, the rhythm of the contact, the quality of the voice, all of it was practiced. Practiced or deeply instinctive, or some combination of the two that the human's biology makes difficult to distinguish. I have read, since that morning, some of the available literature on human behavioral traits. Not the galactic transit documentation, which is mostly focused on their physiological resilience and their somewhat alarming relationship with fear as a motivator. The deeper literature, the observational studies, and the xenobehavioral analyses. There is a section in one such analysis. I believe it's the Varathi Institute's comparative work, the 3rd volume. There's a section on what they call cross-species contact instinct in humans. The argument is essentially that humans evolved in an environment where their survival frequently depended on their ability to form relationships with other species. Not just avoid them, not just coexist with them. Form relationships with them. Work relationships, protective relationships, something that functions like emotional bonds. The argument goes that humans have a drive, a genuine biological drive, not just a cultural tendency, to extend that capacity. That when a human encounters an unknown animal, they don't just assess threat. They assess relational possibility. They're looking for the question, can I make friends with this thing? Every other species we know of, when encountering an unknown large predator, has 2 assessments available. Can I run? And can I fight? Humans, apparently, have a 3rd one. Can I pet it? Part 10, the human SBAKS. At 09:47, approximately 33 minutes after I first stepped onto docking ring 7, the human looked up. Not at the Voakai. The Voakai's eyes were closed. I should mention that. I should mention that I noticed around the 09:30 mark that the Voakai's forward-facing eyes had closed, just the forward pair, the lateral ones remaining open, though at a reduced optical aperture that I read later is consistent with a reduced alertness state. The Voakai was, insofar as the term applies, dozing. The human looked up and looked at the security team first. the 4 Transit Authority members who had been standing near the far corridor door for the past 20-odd minutes, and then, in a slow arc, looked across the ring floor to where the Coalition enforcement team was standing. And then the human looked at me. I was still standing where I'd stopped when I first saw the Volkai. My calibration pad was still recording. I had not moved in 33 minutes. My legs had apparently come to a firm consensus that this was where we were going to be for the foreseeable future. The human looked at me for a moment. Then they raised one hand, the one that had been resting on top of the Volkai's skull, and made a gesture. A slow, easy wave. The kind you give to someone across a transit hall. "Hello, I see you, we're fine." I did not wave back. I was not at a stage in my processing where I had access to social responses. The human appeared unbothered by this. They turned their attention back to the Volkai and resumed contact, hands settling back into place. The voice resumed its low rhythm. At 09:52, the human spoke in a volume that carried, not loudly, but clearly, pitched to reach the room rather than just the creature beside them. They said, "She's not going to hurt anyone. She needed a minute." I did not know at that point how the human knew the Volkai's sex. I added it to the list of things I was going to have to ask about later. The security team near the far door looked at each other. Velis Oran raised their communication unit again. The Coalition enforcement team, Kel, I could see from my position, was leaning against the doorframe in a posture that communicated something between professional neutrality, and I have completely abandoned any expectation that today will make sense. At 09:55, the human said, "She'll be up in a few minutes. You can clear the ring if you want. I'll make sure she goes back to the transport bay." Velis Oran said from across the ring in a voice that was admirably steady, "Are you, sir? Are you in distress?" The human said no. Pause. Part 11, what I found out afterward. His name was Corin Beale. I know this because I pulled the transit records, which is within my authority as a vessel scribe. He was a human from a colony called Brashen's Point, which is, I looked this up, a settlement on a marginal world in one of the outer reach systems. Not a major transit hub, not a research installation, a working settlement, agricultural and resource extraction mostly. The kind of place that doesn't get a lot of documentation in the galactic record and doesn't particularly seem to want it. His listed occupation in the transit system was independent cargo coordinator, which I learned means he moves goods between systems on short-term contracts. No fixed route, no fixed employer. He goes where the contract is and he handles the logistics on the ground when he gets there. He had been at Muravel 9 for 4 days. His cargo contract was a straightforward one, equipment transfer from the station's commercial storage facility to a departing freighter. Nothing complicated, nothing that would require any contact with docking Ring 7 under normal circumstances. Normal circumstances did not include the Volkai Transport's navigator filing a berthing complaint with the Transit Authority at 06:00 that morning, specifically requesting that their Volkai passenger be permitted brief, unsupervised access to the open ring floor for what the filing described as necessary environmental decompression. The Transit Authority had denied the request. The Volkai had, and I'm using the word the Transit Authority later used in their incident review, because they couldn't find a better one. The Volkai had disagreed with this assessment, and had left the transport bay via a maintenance access panel that was not rated for Volkai dimensions, and was subsequently no longer rated for those dimensions. She had been on the ring floor for approximately 40 minutes before Corin Beale arrived. 40 minutes during which the Transit Authority had cleared the ring, locked the access doors, and was in the process of contacting every specialist they could find who had any expertise with Volkai containment or behavioral management. No such specialist, it should be noted, was currently on Muravel 9. The nearest one was 11 transit hours away. Corin Beale had come through the secondary junction door, the same one I used, because he'd taken the same shortcut I take, which is apparently common knowledge among people who spend time on this station. He had stepped onto the ring floor. He had seen the Volkai. And then, according to the statement he gave to the Transit Authority after all of this was over, sitting in a chair across from Velis Oran, calm, slightly distracted, with the particular quality of someone doing a favor for someone who's making it more complicated than it needs to be. According to that statement, he had made an assessment. She was stressed, he said. You could see it. The space was wrong for her. Too closed in, too much ambient noise from the cooling systems, and she'd been in the transport bay for 3 days, and transport bays they're not good for them. For any of them. Big creatures need room. Big creatures that think need room more than they need room. Velis Oran asked how he knew what was wrong with her. Corin Beale said, I grew up around them. There was a pause. There's a population on Brashen's Point. Small one. They came through about 40 years back before I was born looking for, I don't know what they were looking for. Somewhere that wasn't crowded maybe. They stayed. Kept to themselves mostly, but you know, small settlement. You end up knowing your neighbors eventually. Even the ones who are 3 times your height and could take the roof off your building. Another pause. My father used to say, you don't push a Vorkai. You don't chase a Vorkai. You don't try to contain a Vorkai. You sit down, you make yourself small, you keep your voice even, and you wait. And eventually, if you're patient enough and quiet enough and you don't do anything stupid, they'll decide you're not worth being alarmed about. And once they've decided that, you can actually, they're not people think they're not just danger. There's something else there. You just have to be still enough to find it. Velis Oran apparently sat with that for a moment. Then they asked, and the physical contact. Corin Beale said, she leaned in. I didn't go to her, I offered, and she leaned in. That's the whole thing, that's the entire thing right there. You offer, you don't go. You offer and you wait, and if they want it, they'll come to it, and if they don't, they won't. You never go to them. Part 12, the Vorkai leaves. At 10:07, the Vorkai opened her eyes. Both sets, the forward pair first, then the lateral. She remained recumbent for another 4 minutes, the low resonance continuing sporadically, the tail returning to its baseline motion. Corin Beale maintained contact the entire time, sitting now rather than crouching, settled back against the hull of one of the berthed vessels with the Vorkai's head beside him. At 10:11, she rose. The same sequential fold in reverse, back legs first, then front, the neck and head coming up last, the whole process so controlled and gradual that it covered maybe 30 seconds from floor to standing. She stood. She was looking at the far transit corridor, the one that led back to the transport bay. Corin Beale stood too. He said something to her. Low voice, that same cadence. I couldn't hear the words, and I don't know if they were words exactly or something else. A sound, a frequency, something the humans of Brashen's Point had learned over 40 years of proximity. She turned her head and looked at him. Both forward eyes. Direct. The kind of look, and I know how this sounds, I know, and I would not include it in an official document, only in a personal account like this one, the kind of look that has something in it. Not nothing. Something. Recognition, maybe, acknowledgement. She held it for 4 seconds. Then she turned and moved toward the transit corridor, those 4 legs covering the ring floor in long, unhurried strides, tail back to its baseline motion, head level, the blue-green striations calm and dark against the charcoal hide. She went through the transit corridor door. Corin Beale watched her go. Then he picked up his transit pass, which had fallen off his pocket at some point, and headed toward the secondary junction door, back the way he'd come in. He was almost at the door when Velis Oran crossed the ring floor and stopped him. They were close enough to me by then that I could hear the exchange. Oran said, Sir, I need to, there's going to be a report. Corin Beale said, Yeah, I figured. I'll need a statement from you. Sure. A pause. How are you this calm? And Corin Beale looked at Oran, and he had this expression. I've tried to describe it to other people and landed on patient, though that's not quite it. Patient implies you're waiting for something. This was more like someone who has already arrived somewhere and is mildly amused that everyone else is still in transit. He said, I grew up next to them. You're going to be scared of the thing next door for a while, and then one day you're going to stop being scared of it. And after that, you're going to realize that you were never the thing it was scared of either, and then it just gets easier. He went through the junction door. Part 13, the aftermath. I stayed on the ring floor until my legs made a different decision, which took another 6 minutes. Then I went to Sub-Office 14, sat down, and spent 40 minutes writing the account you're currently reading instead of the spice container violations I was supposed to be documenting. The violations will get done. They always get done. This needed to be done first. The Transit Authority review was filed 3 days later. Velis Oran's summary was brief, which I appreciated. No injury, no property damage, no threat to civilian safety. Incident involved a human individual employing unknown behavioral methodology to successfully de-escalate a Volkai in environmental distress. Recommend further study. The Coalition Enforcement Team's report was longer and contained more technical language, and ultimately said the same thing. The formal note from the Volkai Transport's navigation crew, filed the following day, was the shortest. It was addressed to the Transit Authority and read in full. She is calm, safe journey, no further request. That was it. No acknowledgement of the access panel, no acknowledgement of the protocol breach, no acknowledgement of any of it. I don't know if they knew what happened on the ring floor. I don't know if the Volkai, if she communicated anything to them, or if they simply observed her return and made their own assessment from her condition. Maybe they knew exactly what happened. Maybe for them, it was not unusual the way it was unusual for the rest of us. Maybe on whatever worlds the Volkai come from, on whatever terms they've developed their own understanding of the universe, a creature willing to sit down and be still and offer a hand without demanding anything from the offering, maybe that's not remarkable. Maybe we're the ones who forgot how to do it. Ending. I've been a vessel scribe for 19 cycles. I write down what happens. I document the spice violations and the birthing disputes and the tariff arguments. I write the careful, accurate language of the administrative record. I don't usually write like this, but I keep thinking about what Corin Beale said to Velis Oran at the junction door, and I keep thinking about how simple it sounds and how hard it actually is. And I keep thinking that the hardest part isn't staying still. The hardest part is trusting that the thing looking at you from 3.5 meters up, the thing that could end you before anyone got there to help, the thing that every instinct you have is screaming at you about, the thing that every protocol and warning panel and safety document in the known galaxy is designed to keep you away from. The hardest part is trusting that it's also afraid, that it's also alone, that it also, sometimes, just needs a minute. We made a rule. The whole galaxy made a rule every species after every encounter, after every incident report and exclusion zone calculation and proximity protocol review. We made a rule that said, 40 meters, stay back, stay safe, stay away. And it's a good rule, it's a smart rule. It's a rule born from real data and real consequences and real loss. But somewhere on a marginal world called Brashen's Point, a human father told his children a different rule. Not instead of the safety rule, not in contradiction to it. Just alongside it. You offer, you don't go to them. You offer and you wait. And if they want it, they'll come.